Welcome everyone. I'm Robin Zimmerman. This is the 11th session for a Women's Association of Hilton Head Islands author series for 2021. This is our March edition. We're very excited to have you join us. We'll officially meet the author at 5 o'clock. Right now, I'd like to bring in Janet Porter, who is my colleague. I do want to say that our author is very excited to be with us. Her name is Kristi Woodson Harvey, and her latest book is just about to come out. It's called Under the Southern Sky. Hi, Janet. How are you?
Hi, Robin. I'm good. And I'm betting that a lot of people on our webinar today have read some of Kristi's books because the Peachtree Bluff series was very popular. I read those three books a couple years ago. Feels Like Falling, which was her book last year, was a big hit. I think that might be her bestseller. So she's had a lot of, I think a lot of people are going to recognize her name and be anxious to meet her. And she's got so many things going on that anyway, so there's Betty. That's Betty. That's our president-elect.
Our president-elect.
Hi, Betty.
Betty is about to lose it today.
Betty.
Okay, Betty, we're doing our webinar right now.
We've already started. There you go.
There you go. So we'll hear from Betty later. So anyway, Robin, I'm excited that we've got Kristi joining us today.
I know. We talked to her a few minutes ago, and she said that she's actually on the road with her first book tour, and how fun it is to actually meet real people and talk about her upcoming book. So
well, this is her first book tour since COVID, but she's been on book tours before.
Exactly. Yes. Of course. Yeah. Yes. First since COVID.
So Robin, how are you?
I've been good. I've been really good. I'm very excited. I have my best friend just came. She and her husband came this afternoon to visit. I haven't seen her for over a year. So her name is Carol Ann Bostic, and I'll tell you a little bit more about her at the end of our webinar, because there's a connection with our next author that will be with us in May. So I've been great. I feel good. I've been vaccinated with my second vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine. So it was fun to be able to hug Carol Ann and be able to visit with her and her husband this coming weekend. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I've been grounded like everybody since COVID, but I'm ready to hit the road again. I'm going to be in St. Louis in May, and then in Martha's Vineyard later in May with a bunch of girlfriends. And that's just going to feel so good to, for me to get back on the road, because I traveled a lot with business and, pleasure before COVID. So I'm excited about that. But we did the same thing. We had dinner on the deck of the club last night, and then sat on our back deck with three friends last night that we've known for about 20 years. And it just felt so good to do something so normal.
I think that we've all learned about the importance of the little things during COVID, during this last year, and the importance of relationships, our friendships, our family. When you can't be with them, you just don't, we take so much for granted, don't we, Janet?
Yeah, we do.
Well, we're going to, as we usually do, we're going to ask you all a few questions in our polling. And so we've been talking about the vaccine. So we thought we'd maybe ask ladies, as you're coming on again, we'll officially begin at 5 o'clock with Kristi Woodson Harvey. Under the Southern Sky is her new book that's just about ready to come out. But we thought that we would just get to know you a little bit, have you participate, and just ask you a few questions. So our first question is about the vaccination. How many of you have been vaccinated? And so there's our poll. So you can take your mouse, your clicker, whatever it is, and hover over the answer. Have you not been vaccinated? Have you been partially vaccinated? Or have you been fully vaccinated, which I guess would be both your shots of Moderna or Pfizer, or maybe even the Johnson & Johnson shot. So ladies, as we're waiting, as people are signing on to our webinar that starts at 5 o'clock, go ahead and make your selection. So I know, Janet, you've had both. Have you had both your shots? I think you have.
We have. I feel like a dog when people say that. Have you had your shots?
I know.
But it turns out that maybe everybody on the call feels like a dog. It turns out every single person that's on early, and we have about 20 people on early, are fully vaccinated. And you know what? We are so lucky to be, for many of us, to be geographically located and also in the age category where we were able to get vaccinated early on. And local providers have done such a good job of making that process easy. So I think we all count our blessings if we talk to people around the country who haven't been so lucky.
I know. And I was just hearing some news today that Pfizer is saying that there's a possibility, we've talked about this and known this earlier, that we might have to have a booster in the next 6 to 9 months. So that should be an interesting rollout as well. And then of course, everything this week that's been going on with Johnson and Johnson. But yes, I feel so blessed, and I'm so glad that all of our participants have been fully vaccinated. So this is kind of like this, it just sets you free to,
Yeah.
to be back.
But two comments, Robin. One is that they've been saying all along that Moderna and Pfizer are about 95% effective.
Right.
And we have about 100 million people. We're in that vicinity of people who are vaccinated. Well, when they say it's 95% effective, that's mean it's not effective for 5% of people.
True. Right.
So in 100 million people, that's 5 million people that it won't work on. So they're kind of making a big deal about people who are getting COVID, even though they've had even though they've been vaccinated. But we've known that would be the case all along. That's kind of my first comment. And my second comment is the scientists have been thinking all along that what we would do is get COVID as a part of our annual flu vaccine, potentially.
Right.
And I think most people, we may have mentioned this on other webinars, most people may not be aware that the avian flu vaccine, which, it was prevented, which was supposed to be another big pandemic and was contained. When you get your annual flu shot, you're getting vaccinated against what's called H1N1, which is the avian flu vaccine. You're getting that every year. And until I started doing research, I didn't realize that. So they'll just throw it in the annual flu vaccine potentially. And we'll just go every year and get our flu vaccine, get vaccinated against COVID and every other thing. And, but we still have to be cautious because it's not effective on everyone. Like I said, 5% it's not effective on. So we still have to think about masking and social distancing for people because we don't necessarily know who it's going to work on and who it's not.
I know. Well, and I love getting your updates, Janet. I don't know if our viewers, our participants know that you've been a hospital administrator for many, many years. So you're you're on the board, I think, of Hilton Head Regional Healthcare. So you're kind of in that inner circle. So it's good to get that kind of updated information. So I appreciate that. Besides all of your knowledge of authors and your great interviewing skills. So let's go ahead to our next polling question, Janet. And that is about, you touched on it, about going out, whether we're out to a social event or out at a restaurant. So ladies, again, we'll start promptly at 5 o'clock with our author, but we'd like to ask you, are you now going to restaurants and other small social events? And so some of you might just say, no, I'm not ready yet. Others of you might say, maybe a little bit more. And then others of you might say, I am out there a lot more. I'm going to the beach. I'm with other individuals. I'm eating at restaurants, inside, whatever. So what is the results of our poll, Janet? What are people telling us?
Well, Robin, I think we were all at WAHHI really interested in the answer to this poll because we've just had a major event for WAHHI, a luncheon last week, very well attended. I think, Robin, there were like 180 people there.
Yes, and of course we were at the pavilion, the Discovery Coastal Museum, and we were under the of course the pavilion, but then there were people sitting out on the lawn, so and very social distanced. But yes, we had almost 180 people. It was amazing.
Yeah, and I think we were really thrilled that many people came. But I just want to say, I think you'll be somewhat surprised by the results. I chose not to go because I'm still very cautious. I have an older husband, even though we're fully vaccinated. But the results of the poll are 50% of the people said they're going out a little more.
Okay.
29% said they're going out not at all. 30%. And the balance said a lot more. So we have some people who are going out a little bit more. Some people, then the second most popular answer is no, they're not going out at all. It's just restaurants and social events. And the third is that they're going out a lot more. So I think we can be a little misled by the great attendance at our event last week, which was socially distanced and et cetera, because we still have a lot of people who are really hesitant. And that's why activities like our author series are so important, because of those people who are saying no and that they're being very cautious.
Right.
So So,
Yeah,
so
good insight there. And we are coming up on the 5 o'clock hour, but we did want to ask one more question in our poll, Janet, and that is, as we move forward with WAHHI and Betty Hamilton as our new president coming in for the 21-22 year, there is that chat button icon, either if you're on a laptop at the bottom of your screen, if you're on an iPad, perhaps at the top. But what would you like to see more? Again, we're kind of doing a little market research here. What would you like to see WAHHI do more? More of the virtual approach? We have the chef series, we have the author series, we have the environmental and cultural series. Or would you ladies want to have more in-person events like we had last week, even though it was outside? Actually, our first event of the new year will be on September 23rd, and we're back at the Discovery Coastal Museum under the pavilion, outside, socially distanced. So just go ahead in that chat button. That's going to be great information for the program committee, which actually we have a meeting coming up on April 28th. And so it'll just be really good information for us as we continue to plan for our programs for 21-22.
and I want to say Betty Hamilton, who's our incoming president of WAHHI, is on the webinar. She's one of our panelists right now and is anxious to hear your thoughts as she leads us, as she's going to do so well once Tamara, who's, kept us all very engaged this year, done a
Right.
fabulous job. But as Tamara's term ends and Betty comes in, I know Betty's anxious to hear from you as to what you'd like more of. So please feel free to chat, and we keep track of our chats, Robin, as you know. I just also want to say, I want to just recognize the team for a minute, Robin. I don't think we've ever said on the webinar that we do a dress rehearsal every week. We did our dress rehearsal on Monday of this week. We do a dress rehearsal for everyone. We have a script for every one of our webinars. And then we do a debrief afterwards at 6 o'clock. So hopefully it seems seamless to our audience, but it's not without a lot of work. It doesn't just happen by magic. So it's the whole team. I want to really commend Nancy Fish, who is, many of you know, is the executive director of the Sandbox, and she's our technical person. And Tamara, you'll be hearing from later, and Betty has been intimately involved. So we're really lucky. So I'll turn it back over to you, Robin, so that we can get started with Kristi today, who I think is going to be fabulous.
Yes, we're so excited to talk with her, and Janet is signing off, and I believe we're right at 5 o'clock. We do have that chat button, ladies, so if you want to make a recommendation of a book you've been reading or a book that you've heard about, whether it's nonfiction, historical fiction, fiction, novel, whatever, go ahead also in that chat button, that chat icon, and give us any recommendations of books that perhaps you all have read or want to read. It is now 5 o'clock, and so I would like to welcome all of you to the Women's Association of Hilton Head Islands author series for 2021 for the month of March. We're very excited to have a very special best-selling author with us once again. Her name is Kristi Woodson Harvey, and her book is coming out next week. It is called Under the Southern Sky. And I actually have a copy, an advanced copy of it. I'm holding it up now. And Kristi is, again, best-selling author. She's written many other books, novels, whatever, and we're going to hear more about her writing style, how she develops her characters, why she writes, how she writes in just a few moments. We do want to remind you all that we are a webinar, so this is not a Zoom meeting, so you can see us. We cannot see you, so no worries about that. Also, you have that chat button. If you have any questions for Nancy Fish, our techno genius, about the technical piece of this, or if you have any questions of our author, you can go to that chat button and just write any comments, any thoughts about the author series or this particular author as well. So at this time, I don't know if I introduced myself. I'm Robin Zimmerman, and we've been with you all for 11 different sessions of our author series. I cannot believe we've had so many. Janet does a superb job, Janet Porter, my colleague, of interviewing each of these authors. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Janet Porter, for the interview with Kristi Woodson Harvey.
Thank you, Robin. It's hard to imagine. I think we both have been so joined at the hip this last year. It's hard to believe a year ago, we hadn't even met each other, but
We had, and
so-
now we're good friends and we go out to lunch together and.
I know that's what WAHHI's all about, right?
Oh, it's
Right.
exactly.
Right.
Okay, take it away,
So-
Janet.
So thank you, Robin. One of the joys of doing this author series is that sometimes you have authors that you want to meet because you have a book that they've written that you just really loved. But I'm excited to have you meet Kristi because I did not love a book that she wrote, but I loved her Peachtree Bluff series, which is 3 books. And I read those a few years ago. And I was fortunate enough to get an advanced copy of Under the Southern Sky because it's actually being published next week. So this is a big forthcoming book because I could not put it down. I was able to zip through it, and I don't know if authors like to hear this, but I was able to zip through it in about 24 hours because I liked it so much. So let me tell you a little bit about Kristi Woodson Harvey, and I just have to tell you, she is one really busy lady. She is a USA Today best-selling author. And this is her 7th novel, and it comes with really high early praise. She is the winner of the Lucy Bramlett Patterson Award for Excellence in Creative Writing. She was a finalist for the Southern Book Prize, and her work has actually been optioned for film. Her books have received numerous accolades, including Southern Living's Most Anticipated Beach Reads, Entertainment Weekly's Spring Reading Picks, and USA's Today Best Woman Fiction. But in addition to that, she's got a lot else going on. So she serves on the board of the Beaufort Historical Association, and she's a member of UNC's Women's Leadership Council. She is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Journalism, and she has a master's degree in English from East Carolina University, and she had a concentration in multicultural and translational literature. Her writing has appeared in numerous publications and websites, including Southern Living, Traditional Home, Parade Magazine, which you're all familiar with, USA Today, etc. Kristi also, I'm going to explore with her because in addition, she's not busy enough raising her 7-year-old son and, keeping track of her husband, but she is also does a blog with her mom called Design Chic, and she also has something called Friends in Fiction every Wednesday night. So I'm gonna talk to her about both of those things because she's just doing a lot more than just writing books and raising a family. So Kristi, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And Janet, I just have to say, in addition to thank you, yes, the fact that you could not put a book down and you flew through it is my favorite thing to hear. So that's
it is.
Yes.
I think about authors who spend 6 months or whatever writing a book. Last month we did Surviving Savannah, which I know took Patty a long time to research, like 2 or 3 years. And I think when somebody says they read it in a day or two, you think, oh my God, I spent years on that.
No, I kind of, for me, that's like the plan. Like, I hope that people pick it up and they can't put it down and they just want to read it. So I don't know, but maybe it's kind of like, I can see how people would feel the opposite. It's like when you slave over a big meal and then your family takes 10 minutes to eat it and you're like, oh, what did I just do?
Yeah, that's why I don't cook. Because all that work and then it's gone. So people, our audience always loves to hear about how you got started as a writer and you majored in journalism. So you obviously knew at a young age that this was something that was going to be your passion.
Yeah, kind of, but it was sort of like a twisty road to get here. I actually really loved science when I was growing up and had plans to major in biology when I went to college, and go into medicine of some sort. But my senior year of high school, I got an internship at my local newspaper, the Salisbury Post. It's a little town in North Carolina, little daily newspaper. And I just fell in love with writing. I absolutely loved it. I got to write this column every week about, whatever was going on in my life. And sometimes they would send me out to cover like silly little, like I covered stories about things like this giant squash that looked like Elvis Presley and like some really ridiculous, things that no one else wanted to cover. So they sent me out and I was thrilled. But I loved it. And I realized that if I was a writer, I could write about anything and I didn't have to just focus on science. I didn't just have to focus on reading. I could really do whatever I wanted to. My dad was not thrilled with that decision. He was like, what? You're going to do what? But I loved journalism. I loved journalism school, but I always said, I'm going to tell real people's stories. I don't want to write fiction. I'm never going to write a book. Like I'm going to tell real people's stories. And so, it wasn't until, this is young, I know, obviously, but it wasn't until I was about 25 or 26 that I first thought I had this idea. Really, it wasn't even that I thought I want to write a book. I just had this idea and it was like in my head and it kind of wouldn't let me go. And so I sat down and I started writing, and actually ended up writing 3 manuscripts before I thought, okay, I think this is something that I kind of have to pursue because I'm really passionate about it. And so it was, it wasn't like I had breakfast with a girl this morning who's 13 years old and like just knows she wants to be a writer. So I didn't necessarily have that experience, but it has definitely always been a great love for me. And I feel so lucky that I get to do this as my job. It's so fun and I love it every day.
Well, before we get to Under the Southern Sky, because you are busy with so many other things, tell us a little bit about your writing process. What's your kind of discipline and rigor around how you write?
Yeah. So, I feel like my life is kind of in chunks, if that makes sense. I think probably a lot of people understand. Well, I don't know. Writing's maybe a little bit unique in this way, but I'll spend about 2 to 3 months writing a first draft of a novel. And I'm like very invested when I'm doing that. I am really like, I try to not be traveling during that time. I try to write 7 days a week. But really it's only like a couple of hours a day. It's not like I'm sitting down at my desk from 9 to 5. And in some ways, I think it's kept it really fun for me because I'm not just like chained to my desk for hours and hours at a time. And so then after that, I'm editing. So I do that for a couple of months, but that's usually like a little bit of a busier process. I'm usually doing that when I'm like out on the road a little more, I'm touring a little bit. And then I turn the book in and it's about a year until it comes out, but it's always a cycle. So like once I turn one in, I'm starting the next one, or usually honestly, I've started it and I'm just really getting cranking on it. But this year, all bets were off. Everything was different this year. Normally I go on the road for about 6 weeks when a book comes out. And I think in 2019, I did like 89 speaking engagements. So I was traveling well, I know you said you travel a lot for work. So probably not like someone like you was, but I was traveling a lot, in like 2017, 18, 19 in those years. And of course, when COVID hit, all that just stopped. And it was crazy and it was scary because I sold books by going out on the road and hugging people and signing their books. So it was very scary in that way, but it also gave me a lot of extra writing time because I wasn't on the road at all. So, to do an event sitting at your computer really takes an hour. Whereas if I was coming to you guys live, which I hope I will be one day,
We hope you will too.
You're getting in the car and you're driving and you're talking and you're having drinks and then you're spending the night and, it's definitely like a more involved process. So I was able to kind of just get a lot more writing done. So I actually have 2 books coming out this year, which you mentioned Peachtree Bluff. And I joke that Christmas and Peachtree Bluff is like the book that people wrote because so many people during COVID kept asking me for more Peachtree Bluff. And I just got this idea. So I was like, I'm home, I'm going to write it. And it was just one of those things. I said this to you kind of jokingly earlier, but I really do mean it. I think keeping myself busy during COVID was really helpful because I didn't have so much time to sort of think about how terrible everything was. I could just go into my little writing world and it was great. But as you said, there are a lot of other things going on. And so I try to sort of segment my day where I'm doing a couple hours of writing, a couple hours of work on promotion, and then a couple hours of work on design chic and friends and fiction. So it's, every day doesn't look the same, but it all balances out in the end, I think, so far.
So you're on the road right now, Kristi. I know you're at Palmetto Bluff. And when will you be off the road for promoting Under the Southern Sky?
So this is actually a really short tour, but I'm really grateful for it all the same. It was probably about 6 weeks ago that we thought, okay, we've got to make some decisions because we had like probably a 4 to 5 week tour planned because, you have to plan. Even though it was COVID, we could not plan the tour because if everything was great and the world had opened back up, I would have wanted to be on tour. But then if it, we just didn't know. So we had planned the whole tour. And then of course, we said, okay, we're just going to call and we're going to start canceling all the events. And my manager called me the first day and she said, you know, a lot of these places are saying they want you to come if you feel comfortable, because most of their people have been vaccinated and they're really ready, and things will look different. Like I'm doing a lunch, like, okay, last night in Palmetto Bluff, the event was outside. Everybody was very distanced. Like there was, you know, space between all the chairs. And tomorrow, like normally I think I would have like 150 people at the Litchfield luncheon, and they capped it at 80 this year, you know, things like, so they can spread out and it's a little more distanced. But all that to say, there were a decent amount of places that wanted to do that. And I said, okay, you know, just not really knowing what was going to happen. I said, well, let's just do places I can drive. So I'm going to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And I come home like May 2nd. So it's not very long.
Well, that's hard with a 7-year-old though.
Well, yeah, it's kind of our life though. I mean, this year is a little bit different because like I'll be with them this weekend, and then I'm only gone for another week. So it's not so bad. But when he was little, my parents would pack up and we would all go on book tour the whole time. So it's really only been like last year, obviously I didn't go on tour at all. The year before was insane because he couldn't miss 6 weeks of school, and my husband couldn't miss 6 weeks of work to go, you know, bring him with me. So we just made it so that, you know, every 4 or 5 days, like they flew and met me wherever I was, and then I would come home. But after that, I did say no more 6-week tours. I can't. But, you know, I also think like, I remember this, I will never forget this. He was in like first grade and I was on book tour, and he came home and he said, Mom, did you know that Bo's mom doesn't go on book tour? Like he just, you know, it was just like book tour was a thing that moms did. Like where they but it's always worked out. I have great parents, and my husband is super supportive, and he adjusts his work schedule when I'm gone so that he can do a lot of the pickup. And like, you know, I do crazy things. Like I fly home for field day and then like fly right back out, you know, it's just, but it works. But again, I'm not going to do the 6 weeks anymore, I don't think. But 3 or 4 is pretty fun.
So Kristi, one of the things we want to do is get people excited about being able to read your latest book, Under the Southern Sky, which comes out next week. Thank you for sending me an advance copy. That was terrific. So why don't you give a quick overview of the book?
Yes. Well, first of all, I just have to say thank you for reading it. And I'm so excited about this book. I have been sort of thinking about it. It's been in the back of my mind for like 5 years, which is pretty unusual for me. But it's a story about an investigative journalist named Amelia, who is doing research for a big story. And she discovers that a cluster of frozen embryos belonging to a childhood friend of hers named Parker and his late wife, Greer, have been deemed abandoned. So she, of course, has to tell Parker this. And Parker is really just stuck since his wife, Greer, died. He just cannot move forward. And she knows that when she tells him, it's going to really affect him and it's going to be a big deal. And she doesn't want to be the person that hurts him in this way, but she knows she has to. And so then Parker has to decide what he's going to do with what is effectively the last remaining part of this woman that he loved so much. So we get to hear from both Parker and Amelia in this story. We also get to hear from Greer through her journal entries. And then Amelia's good Southern meddling mama, who's Elizabeth, plays a role in this story too. And all of these characters have secrets. And as those secrets unravel, what ultimately happens to these embryos ends up being revealed.
Yeah, there are, without going into details, there are secrets revealed that I did not anticipate.
Oh, good.
So, yeah. Elizabeth's secret in particular was quite shocking, but I don't want to ruin the story.
I didn't know Elizabeth's secret either. I did not know it, like as I was going into the story. And so I discovered that one right along with you, Janet.
You mean you writing it and then you thought, oh, this is Elizabeth's secret?
Yeah, like just as I'm writing, I don't plan out when I'm going to write. I just am writing and it just happened. And I was like,
boy, that's interesting, because I thought the way you wrote the book, you absolutely had, in retrospect, I thought you planned that all along, but just to get people intrigued about Elizabeth's story. So, you know, Kristi, I read your Peachtree Bluff series, as I mentioned, and you said you have a Christmas at Peachtree Bluff coming out. So you're an artist who really, I think, is well known for character development. And so talk about how that happens. Like you can mention Greer and Amelia if you want, or Parker, but are your characters based on, I always am interested in this question, are these characters based on people that you know, or And if your friends kind of after the book goes out said, oh, you really wrote about Bob. We knew that was Bob.
Yes. Oh, and okay, so the most hilarious thing about this question, Janet, is that people will be like, oh my gosh, we know that you were really writing about so and so. And I'm like, I don't even know who that is. Or like, I like vaguely think, no, I didn't know. It's so funny what people think. And even just little things, like people will be like, oh, that was my house in the book, right? And I'm like, what? That was a White House and your house is gray. Like, how would that have been your house? I mean, it's so funny. It's like people start to visualize what they want to see or what they want to think, which is just hilarious to me. But, I think sometimes it kind of depends on the situation. I do think sometimes I'll have a person in my head that I'm sort of vaguely basing a character on. But I say it's kind of like when you meet a new friend and I loved you and Robin talking about becoming friends through this last year in your group. That was so great. But it's like when you meet a new friend and you have this idea in your head about who they are kind of vaguely, but then the more you get to know them, the more you're like, you know what? I think she would do this, or I actually think he would do that instead. Or, this is a part of this person's story that I really didn't know. And so that's what it's like for me. It's like I'm getting to know them throughout the process of this story. Elizabeth and Olivia, who are the mothers in this book, were not based on anyone in particular, but I wanted to write these like super traditional, like kind of uptight Southern mothers. Like that's really, I didn't really have anyone specific in mind, but I had this just kind of like caricature of, people in my mind. But then I wanted them to become, I wanted them to have a lot of depth to them too. And I wanted there to be some really real reasons for the meddling that they do in this book, let's say. And so they were very fun to write. But Amelia, she could have she's someone that I would have been friends with, someone that, is my age and is starting to, look at her life in a different way. And all of a sudden gets this big bombshell thrown at her when, she realizes that her marriage is falling apart. And so I wouldn't say that I specifically based her on anyone, but I do think that just the idea of the things that people at my life stage are going through, where it's so divergent. And you see that with Amelia and her friends. Like some people are having babies. Some people have not met the person they want to spend their life with. Some people have been married for 12 years. People just are at very divergent places in their lives. And I think you kind of get to see that through these characters a little bit. And then you have Parker, who's already a widower. And I don't really know who he was based on, but I'm like trying to think. But I adore him.
It's kind of like the character, I forget what his name is in Bridgerton, for anybody in the audience who's watched Bridgerton, who's hot. I just have to say, I pictured him as hot, based on the way he described him.
No, he totally is hot for sure. And oh man, I don't think any of us will ever get over the Duke. That's
So the other aspect of this book, I was very interested to say that you were originally interested in science, because this book is really about cryopreservation, which is the freezing of embryos, but which is often offered to cancer patients. I mean, it's a best practice to offer that to female cancer patients as a way to preserve their opportunity to have children later on, should they wish to. And so your science background is that what intrigued you about this concept of frozen embryos?
Actually, yes. So when I was in college, I did this science writing. I did some science writing courses, and I sort of covered this science writing beat, I guess you would say. So I did a lot of work on like women's health and things like that, a lot of these fields were really blowing up at that time. This was around 2006, 7, 8, around that time. And so, a lot of these things have come a really long way in a really short amount of time. And there was a ton of work that was being done right then on, fertility and IVF and all these things that, are pretty common, but we're really moving forward in terms of like, oh, we can now choose the sex of your baby. Oh, we can now predict which embryos have the best chance of survival. Oh, we can, if you carry the gene for X, that's okay. We can remove it. All these things were happening, and I was studying them, and I was just fascinated by this. And so it was something that was, already something I was interested in. But the idea for the story actually came because a friend of mine 5 years ago or 6 years ago, it was right before my first book was about to come out. So I guess it was 2015. and she had just had twins via IVF. And she came to me at a party one night and she was really upset. And she said, we have to figure out what we're going to do with our leftover embryos. And we never thought about this. This was not something anyone mentioned to us. We just never, all we wanted was our babies. And we just did not ever think about what would happen next. And, this is a situation where you really get into all those like ethical things that none of us ever really want to talk about. But it depends on, because they are fertilized cells. I mean, they are technically viable life. So, some people just think it's no big deal. It's a few cells, get rid of them. Some people think this is life. It's sacred. We can't get rid of it. Some people think it's not really life, but it can really be used for scientific research purposes. There are people who adopt out their embryos, which I think is just amazing, especially if you have children, because they're your biological children, like with your husband. So I think it's really brave when people do that. So there's a lot of gray area in the subject matter. And I remember thinking when she said that, and she said to me, you should write a book about this because a lot of people are going to be going through the same thing. And I remember when she said it thinking, that's so interesting, but how do you raise the stakes on that? Because half the people that would pick up that story and read it would think, who cares? Just get rid of them. So I thought we have to raise the stakes somehow. And so for me, the raising of the stakes was, I knew one of the parents of these embryos would have to be deceased. And, I think for all of us as a society, I think the idea of single mothers is a pretty standard concept. If you have someone comes to you and says, I haven't met the right person, but I'm going to have a baby. We're not just like shocked by that. It's something that we've seen play out in life and TV and media and all of those things. But I don't think we see representations of single fathers quite as much, or single fathers by choice, I guess. And so I thought that would make a more interesting story, to have a man who's put in the situation of having to decide, do I become a single father and completely upend everything in my life? Just this is very stereotypical, but most men just, I don't know what to do with a baby alone. I babysat. I wasn't like some star baby person. I didn't know everything, but I had changed a diaper and fed a baby. I can guarantee you my husband had never held a baby until I gave birth to one. So, but yeah, I also think there was so much in the media when I started writing the book. This idea of these abandoned embryos is a huge thing right now, because what's happening is people are doing IVF and it costs a lot of money to freeze these embryos. It's like we had the cord blood stored when little Will was born, and you pay for that storage every single year. Mm-hmm. So it's extremely expensive. And so what starts happening is people can't make the decision. They don't know what to do, but they don't want to pay for the storage anymore. So they quit paying for the storage. And then these doctors and offices and facilities that cryogenically freeze these things are left. It's like millions of unclaimed frozen embryos. And it's a big ethical debate because no one's paying for them, but they technically, what do you do with them? Can you destroy someone's embryos even if they're unclaimed? So it's a big thing going on in the media right now. And I'll be interested to see, where we land on what that decision is going to be.
Well, that's obviously your science background kicking in.
Yeah, I probably said too much about that, and y'all are like, okay, move on. But I just think
it's interesting because I just want to add another book. There's a book right now called Code Breaker, which is Walter Isaacson's latest book. And it's really about the technology that's allowed us to so quickly get a vaccine that it actually ties to the technology around frozen embryos and the ability to genetically, modify frozen embryos. So, and Walter Isaacson, I think people know, is the one who wrote the definitive book on Stephen Jobs and our Albert Einstein. He's a noted biographer. So, but we digress. So what is it about writing that you most love? Is it having this nugget of an idea that you explore, or is it doing research, or is it character development, or what is it that most gives you joy?
So it took me a while to pinpoint this when I first started writing. And when I first sat down, I wrote that first book, I was hesitant because I'm a real rule follower. So I had this idea about how this was supposed to go. And I had this outline, even though I am not an outliner. I have never been an outliner, not even in school. And I would sit down at the computer and I would have this idea of what today's writing was supposed to look like. And I was having this like push pull with myself of like, well, this is what my outline says, but this feels like where the story wants to go. And so when I finally just let myself say, I'm just going to see where the story goes. There's no harm, no foul. No one ever has to read this. Let's just see what happens. That's when I really fell in love with it, because that to me is the magic of writing, is when you sit down at your computer and you have this blank page and you haven't planned what's going to happen next. And in your mind, you're thinking what's going to happen next, and you start working on that. And then all of a sudden it's like something kind of outside of you takes over. And it sounds a little woo woo, because I mean, it's your imagination and your creativity, but it's somehow like the deeper you get into the story, the more the story starts taking over. And the characters start taking over and they come to life in a way that you wouldn't have imagined. And just like I said to you, like Elizabeth has this big secret that I didn't know. And, even the secret between Amelia and Greer, like I had no idea that was going to happen. I
didn't know that either.
Yeah, I just felt in the end of, and I will say that's something I actually added later, but when I got to the end, I actually had made myself notes throughout the manuscript of like, I want them to have something that Parker doesn't know about, so that when you get to the end of the story, you're like, yes, like go Greer and Amelia. Like, I don't know. It just felt like it bonded them in this way that, and it almost felt like, Greer kind of knew what was going to happen. Anyway, I don't know. I'm not going to give it away, but that to me that's what I love, is just those days when you sit down and you're just kind of in the zone and it just flows, and you haven't really even planned it, but like somewhere, something inside you has known this was going to happen all along. And that's my favorite part. It really is. It's incredible. And then it's so funny too. I did an interview this morning, and they were asking about process and how long everything takes. And I was like, well, you have to go through the part where you're like, this is the most brilliant story I've ever written. And then you get to the part of like, every word of this is complete trash and nonsense. Like, who wrote this terrible book? I could never let anyone read this. And then you're kind of like, well, I guess it's okay. Well, maybe if I change this, I mean, it's so neurotic, but I think we're all like that. I mean, every writer that I talk to goes through those ups and downs. It's just a part of your process. But I think that beginning is so great because there are no expectations on this manuscript at all. Like I'm not turning it in. No one has to read it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just, there's a freedom in that is just so fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So Kristi, I just want to say to the audience again, that I would love for you to chat in questions. People have questions. And I saw that Susie Fisher raised her hand. So if you have any questions for Kristi based on our conversation so far, please let me know. Just chat them in and I can read them right on the screen, and I'll ask Kristi those questions. So while we're doing that, Kristi, I want you to talk a little bit about, you've got two other big things going on in your life, lots going on in your life, but you've got Design Chic with your mom.
Yeah.
And with your mom, Beth. And so talk a little bit about that, because I love that website, by the way.
Thank you. Oh, that's so nice of you. Well, Design Chic actually started long before I was writing, which is crazy to think about. It was in 2010, and Mom and I were both redoing houses. And she called me one day and she said, I need a new hobby. And I just laughed out loud because my mom is really busy. She's always super involved in stuff. And like she always has a million things going on. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, I feel like I'm getting older. I need to learn a new skill. I need to stay sharp. I just want to do something that I've never done before. And I was like, oh my God. Okay. Which I totally respect in retrospect. But I was like, Mom, we should start a blog, because we were both redoing these houses. And she said, great, what's a blog? And so I, was like, oh, it's a website. We can write about whatever we want. And she said, well, since we're both redoing houses, let's write about interior design. And I was like, okay, great. And so we live at the time we lived about 3 hours apart, 3.5 hours apart. So we met halfway in Raleigh, and I taught her how to download a picture and how to attach something to an email and these like really funny things. And I thought, I'm starting a website with a person that can't send an email. Like, this is the worst idea that I've ever had. But we had zero expectations. This is like the theme of my talk today. We had no expectations for this website at all, but we really didn't. We thought it would be something fun to do. We wanted to learn a little bit about it. And we always said, when it stops being fun, we'll quit doing it. So about 6 months in, that was about our timeline. We thought we're going to do this for 6 months and then we'll probably kind of hang it up. And about 6 months in, we had hit 1,000 email subscribers, which isn't that many, but it's kind of a milestone, because it's sort of like, okay, like there are actually some people reading this every day. This is kind of cool. And then soon after that, we started getting advertising requests, which was really interesting because we didn't even know that was like a thing. We were not expecting things like that to start happening. And so then we kind of got serious about it after probably 18 months to 2 years because, we were starting to work with more designers and we were getting more advertisers. We were kind of just taking it up a notch in terms of like, okay, we like need to really learn how to do this and learn what we're doing. And if we're going to do it, let's really do it. And the thing about, having a blog or anything on the internet is that everything changes all the time. So it was right around the time that I started, I think I got my first book deal. It was probably around 2015. And at that time, Facebook had been like the end all be all for blogs because you put things on Facebook, people went straight to your website. It was amazing. Facebook changed their algorithm. Our traffic went in half overnight, meaning we had to go back to all of our advertisers and say, hey, we have half the traffic that we did. And so we actually thought about sort of shutting down then because we were like, I was going to start writing but we had all these followers and I thought, I'm starting this new career and there are some people on this website that already know who I am. And I mean, how y'all, all of you ladies know, it's not like everybody likes just one thing. I mean, everybody might not like my books that likes design chic and everybody that, but that's okay. There's a lot of overlap in those audiences. And so we were like, let's just keep going and see what happens. And then of course, everything ebbs and flows and Pinterest came on the scene in a big, big way and took over in a way that Facebook never did. And, all's well that ends well, but we're still here. I mean, it's been, 11 years that we've been doing Design Chic.
11 years. And how many followers do you have now, Kristi?
Like 550,000.
550,000. And I saw you just had an entry like April 15th.
Oh yeah. No, we do it every day.
Yeah. I just saw the one. I just love the one that you just put up. So I didn't know you did it every day, but
yeah. And it's different things. Like we do house tours a couple times a week. We do our top 10 favorites once a week. A couple days, we do like shopping posts and then like links to things we love. And it's fun. We're keeping it going. We're always, in fact, I was driving like 7 hours yesterday and we're always talking about, okay, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do differently? And the world changes a lot. So I can't say that this is something that will continue to be feasible. And, in 2010, the internet was the wild, wild west. I mean, you just grabbed whatever you wanted and you could use it. And that was it. Now it's a lot of work because, especially for Mom, because she does all of our images and, everything that we use, we have permission and there's a lot of forms and there's a lot of legality. And so, we'll see what happens. But so far we're like, we'll just keep doing it. And then if we stop one day, we'll stop one day. So
I just want to comment to the audience that Nancy, who's, a key part of our team, just gave the link to your website, which is called mydesignchic.com.
Thanks,
And Nancy just mentioned that in the chat function. And also, Kristi, I want to tell you that Jane has written in and asked for you to comment on what does a journalism career look like for college grads today? What is your best advice for college students?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually have to say, I don't think it's a bad time to be in journalism. When I graduated in 2008, it was not great, but nothing was great. I mean, the economy tanked, everything was terrible. Journalism was really hard hit. And we hadn't exactly come to this really nice point yet where people could make a living writing on the internet. That wasn't so much of a thing back then, whereas it really is now. The journalism landscape changes constantly. But I think newspapers are going to be here. I think magazines are going to be here. I think that we're going to see things just take a different turn. A lot of things have, gone all virtual, gone all online, but they're still there. They still have writers. They're definitely, some of the bigger publications are consolidating a little bit more. So you might see, which is great if you're like on Coastal Living's best book list and they also put it on Southern Living or, whatever.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's different. And I also think that there's this real opportunity for people to freelance and make their own way because magazines are cutting a lot of their staffs. And there was a time in my career, like while I was working in finance and I went part-time in that job and really started to try to build my clips as a freelance writer. And there was a lot of work. There was a lot of opportunity for people who had a degree in journalism to do that kind of work from home because people weren't hiring staffs that were quite as large. But post-COVID, I honestly don't know. I mean, one of the major publishing houses in New York just announced that they are never going to go back to their regular all in the same building work environment. So it's going to be interesting to see. And I think it's just, only time will tell. But, I think if you're passionate about writing and you love it, there are always opportunities for people who, are passionate about what they do, and it's not going to go anywhere, I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to ask a final question from you, Kristi. You're in a group you put together, I think, the group called Friends in Fiction, right?
Well, I mean, we all put it together. So.
Which is, for those of you who are big readers, which is Mary Alice Monroe, who we just spoke to, Mary Kay Andrews, who's the only one in the group we haven't met yet with WAHHI. We got to get her on our list.
She's amazing.
Kristen Harmel, Kristi, Woodson, Harvey, and Patty Callahan Henry is your Friends in Fiction group. So talk a little bit about what you guys do.
Okay, well, that's why I was laughing and saying this is the theme of the thing today, is like, well, we did it and we didn't know it was going to work. But this is an honest and true story that we did not expect any of this. So the pandemic hit, obviously. We all had new books coming out. None of us could go on the road. And I think it was Mary Kay texted us one night and was like, what are we going to do? And she said, let's all get on Zoom and drink wine and complain. She's really funny. Like, she's just so funny. And we were like, yeah, okay. So we all got on Zoom and we drank wine and we complained about how our careers were all going to go down the toilet because we couldn't, but I mean, we did, but we also were like, okay, what do we do? How do we save this? And we also were really, really worried about independent bookstores because, most of the independent bookstores survive and make money because authors go out on the road and go into their stores and they sell books. I mean, that's a big part of their business model. And then also, not to mention the fact that people couldn't walk in their doors. And, if you're going to buy a book online, your independent bookstore is usually not the first place that you think of. I think people are thinking of that now during the pandemic because they're thinking, we got to save these businesses that we love. But before that, I don't think people were really thinking about that. So we were really worried about that too, because we thought if we lose our independent bookstores, they're so vital to our communities. So we were sort of brainstorming ideas, and as we were chit-chatting, Mary Kay said, do you know what would be fun? And we were like, what? And she said, people are at home, they're bored. And she's like, let's all go live on our Facebook pages, because we could go live on all our Facebook pages at the same time and do this. And we'll talk about writing and bookstores and our new books and what we love. And people can join in because they're bored too, and they don't have anything to do, and it'll be fun and we'll all have a good time. And we were like, yeah, let's do it. And so we did it the first week, and we did not expect anyone to come. Like, to the point, I seriously think if you look back on the first episode, I think Mary Kay was in her pajamas. Like, that's how much we did not think people were going to come. And the first night, I think we had 1,000 live viewers, and we were like, what is happening? And by the end of the week, I think we had like 20,000 views on this video. And so we were like, okay, well, this is the thing. And people were messaging us and emailing us and saying, oh, this is such a bright spot. Please keep doing this. Please keep doing this. And so we were like, okay, this is good. We've hit on something. So we made this plan, and we said, we each have a book coming out, and they were all over the next 7 weeks. We're going to do this for the next 7 weeks. Every week, we're going to pick an independent bookstore to support, mostly like in our hometowns or something, and ask people to support that bookstore with our book release. So we started our own Facebook page, and after 7 weeks, I think we had like 10,000 members or something insane. So Mary Alice, Kristen, and I all have the same publisher, which is Gallery Books, which is a part of Simon & Schuster. And the president of Gallery, we hadn't told our publishing houses we were doing this because we just didn't think anything of it, And she was at her father's house and said he was watching something on Facebook, and she heard these familiar voices. And she came over and she was like, 3 of those people are my authors. What is this? This is amazing. And so she called us the next day, and she was like, I really want y'all to keep doing this. What can I do to help you? How can I support you? Like, what can I do? And we said, well, we're a disaster. Can you hire us tech people? And she was like, absolutely. So they really helped financially back us to get us some tech people. And we hired a managing director because as you well know, when you're putting these things together, there are a lot of moving parts to organize. And so, we're inviting the authors and chat. There's just a lot to organize. So yeah, so they helped us, and we just celebrated our 1-year anniversary last night, which is
How many followers do you have now, Kristi? Just quickly.
I think we're at about across our platforms, we're at about 45,000, which is
45,000. So Nancy has also put up a connection to Friends in Fiction. I recommend you check it out.
Thank you.
And I have to say, Kristi, thank you so much for joining us today. Under the Southern Sky is a great read. I immerse myself in books during COVID, and it's helped me survive. And this one will help you do that too. So thank you so much for joining us, Kristi.
Thank you for having me. This was a real treat. I really appreciate it.
So Robin, back to you.
Thank you, Kristi. That was an interview that I did not want to end. You were absolutely delightful. Thank you so much on behalf of WAHHI, the Women's Association of Hilton Head Island. Again, her book is Under the Southern Sky by Kristi Woodson Harvey. It comes out next week, I believe, on the 20th of April. So Janet, again, outstanding job, great interview. It's so fascinating that she sits down at the computer and just writes and doesn't have that outline, and she just the creative juices that she has just basically blow my mind. Great job. I'd like to introduce now another phenomenal woman. As you all know, our president, Tamara Averett. Tamara is finishing up her year in May. We had a great event last week at the Coastal Discovery Museum. Still things to come this year. So Tamara, take it away.
Thanks so much, Robin and Janet and Kristi. Just such a fun interview with you. The other thing was talking about your mom learning a skill or staying sharp and meeting friends. I mean, that's kind of what our whole association is all about. And when you volunteer with WAHHI and you do something like this, you're definitely doing all three of those things at the same time. I have just a couple little slides to share about things that are upcoming because we're not yet done with our year. We have our transition here on June 1st over to Betty. So we've got a couple things still running in our last 6 weeks. And I want to make sure you all remember to register for Kirk Neely. He's our next author on May 20th, featuring December Light. Also, just so everybody knows to mark their calendar, this author series is moving to this, not second Thursday. Sorry about that typo. Second Thursday instead of third Thursday, with Kristen Harmel and Mary Alice. So you're going to be getting more information about that as these new events come up for registration on our events website. But it's the second Thursday at 5 p.m. that we're going to continue our author series on Zoom. We also have the membership year. We've got a few things that are still coming up. Many of you may already be attending these. We've got the Burnt Church Distillery tasting, the Audubon Newhall Preserve walks. Last time I checked, there were still 5 for the birding walk at 8:30. I don't know how many have subscribed since Wednesday. Our Salty Dog GNO, Girls Night Out, Happy Hour Cruise, April 27th, and Rollers Women Winemakers. We're going to taste 3 wines by women vintners. And most of those are now filled, but if you're really interested in something, keep your name on the wait list and we'll see, because there's usually a couple folks that always drop out. But most importantly, we've got a whole bunch of things for Get Out on the Water. Island Head and Susan Flynn have done a great job collaborating with getting us some paddleboard dates, a sunset dolphin tour or 2, as well as kayak out on Skull Creek. So just really want to continue to encourage women to stay active, stay WAHHI, and stay involved with your association in new and fun ways and learning new things as well. We do have our springtime golf scramble coming up. We're almost to our 72 player mark. This is the first time we've ever done this shotgun start. We're not killing anybody. It's just how we're starting the day with everybody on a different tee to tee off. And it's going to be super fun with some great prizes, gifts, and just some really good sisterhood time and women. So hope, you know, whatever your skill set, if you're joining with a team, if you're just a beginner golfer and you want to come out and play and experience your very first scramble, come on out. It's going to be a lot of fun. Our February membership meeting is posted in our video library. You can always go back and visit and talk a little bit, learn a little bit more about the Heritage Library. I just want to let you know that today, Happy Heritage Day, everybody. Round 1 is done. I rode the bus from Honeyhorn over to the Heritage today, and guess who I saw but Barbara, and an interview with our very own Robin. And they're talking about the Heritage and the Heritage Classic Foundation and the support that the Heritage Library receives from there. So once again, Robin did a great job in our community, and hearing Barbara and the Heritage story was just really fabulous. Just announced on April 8th, we had our luncheon. It's the September 23rd at Coastal Discovery Museum. Mark your calendars. We're going to be back there at that wonderful venue, and Betty and her team are going to be planning a fantastic day for all of us to kick off our next year. In our e-blast that came out on April 9th, these Athleisure Style Show partners had a number of different specials that were with you. And I think you're nearing the end of being able to capitalize on some of those specials, like Jiva Yoga punch cards, or some savings that you may have from Players World of Sports. So just make sure that you're taking advantage of your WAHHI membership and going and shopping local. With your generosity, we raised over $2,200 with our 60th anniversary gift raffle, with many of those vendors coming and supporting that raffle. Holly Bounds, a new member, which we always love, won the new e-bike. And so she's going to be out there on the Hilton Head Paths biking here shortly. Also, we awarded 5 $1,000 awards for our Youth Community Service Awards on April 8th. And you can read all about those award recipients on our WAHHI news page. So go to wahhi.org and click on WAHHI News at the top navigation, and you can learn a little bit more about the youth story for this year and all of the wonderful things that they do. And yes, we did award a youth service award to a gentleman this year as well. Just to remind, we did award 7 grants to women and children initiatives in our community this year. Over $10,000 went to these great organizations, and they're doing everything from the Saving Our Sea Turtles with the information to the doing Uber rides so that women that have some food insecurity can get to the Sandalwood Food Pantry. So we're delighted that we were able to do that. And then announced on April 8th, we did do the $20,000 to Coastal Discovery for the Garden Labyrinth development. Right now you see an empty field, but hopefully by the end of this year, you're going to be seeing a wonderful hardscape as well as native planting labyrinth that's for our community, men, women, children, handicap accessible. And we're really excited that it rounds out a lot of what's at WAHHI and the Coastal Discovery Museum that's there. And we were also, with the funding wherewithal, able to give a donation to the Sandbox Children's Museum for their capital campaign as well. So we're always in search of new volunteers to help us in WAHHI, and I just encourage y'all to raise your hand and step in. Betty is standing by at her phone to receive your call. If you want to be an event planner, plan a special event, be an ambassador in your neighborhood to help WAHHI information with those that you are around a lot, or if you know web services, Zoom, Word, any type of technical, if you don't know and you want to learn it, we'll teach you. Whatever you can do, now's the time to raise your hand to Betty and say you want to step in and volunteer. And we look forward to you participating in whatever way that you can with however much you can give. So thank you so much to Kristi and Janet and Robin for another fantastic author series, the 11th in our series this year. And we're excited for Kirk next month. So thank you, Robin. Thank you all.
Thank you, thank you, Tamara. And one of the items in chat said, thank you for your leadership during this year. What a year it has been, the year of COVID, the year of our 60th anniversary. It has been outstanding, and you have been an amazing, amazing leader for all of us. We've been able to do so many different things virtually and in person. So we all of us WAHHI women, thank you, Tamara. Now, if you have specific authors you want us to interview, to have on our author series, please let us know in that chat section. We're still planning our plans for 21-22, so just chat those specific authors. Want to remind you, if you love the authors that you've seen on our series, buy their books, whether it's at an independent bookstore or whether it's Barnes and Noble, but that's how you really show your love for the authors that we've had on our series over this last year. And with that, I'm so excited to introduce Kurt Neely on May 20th. I'm real excited to see him because I know him. Actually, his youngest son is married to my best friend's daughter. And he is an outstanding author. He's an outstanding individual in Spartanburg, South Carolina on many fronts. His book is called December Light, 1916. So again, that's on May 20th. And with that, that's a wrap, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the author series for WAHHI for March or excuse me, for April, and we will see you in May. Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.